Welcome to today's webinar, PPM Configuration to Support KeyBank's Funding Lifecycle for Programs and Projects. Today's date is January 26, 2021. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Vivit PPM Special Interest Group, or SIG for short. I am Benny Kung, the SIG leader, and today's moderator for the webinar. Next slide, please. So some quick background information about myself. I am the Business Development Manager at PPmetrics, a specialized PPM solution provider based in New York City, where I also reside. I had joined Mercury Interactive right after its acquisition of Quintana. I was in the professional services organization and started working with what PPM was known back then, ITG, IT governance, and specifically version 5.5. After HP purchased Mercury, I transitioned to a lead solution consultant role. I eventually left HP in 2009 and helped start PPmetrics, where we specialize in creating unique proprietary add-ons for PPM, such as Spot, our integration tool for our integration tool, and XLI, our Excel-based productivity tool. In addition, we also provide consulting and education services. Next slide. I am very pleased to introduce today's guest speaker, Tasha Holland from KeyBank. She's a manager in the Technology and Operations PMO. I'm going to hand it off to her just to add some quick background. Tasha?
Thanks, Benny. Tasha Holland. I'm currently manage the Key Technology and Operations Project Management Office. I've been in banking for 25 years, the last 10 or more of which I've been working in technology, supporting, developing, designing several project lifecycle tools. Been working at KeyBank since 2016 and have been supporting Microfocus's PPM tool since that time.
Great, thanks for that. So let me go through some quick housekeeping items, then we can begin the session. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the contents, including this recording, will be available to all the Vivit members afterwards. That also includes any questions from our Q&A session. You should get an email from Vivit when all this gets posted. And speaking of questions, if at any point you do have a question, please go ahead and type it into the questions pane of the webinar control panel. I'm going to show you a screenshot of where you can find that next. Next slide. So here is that screenshot. In the upper right-hand corner is where you should find this control panel. You're going to want to type your question in the text box of the question/chat section. So in this, see a question, is it compatible with all web browsers? Right below that is a text area where you type your questions, and then afterwards you just click on the send, and we'll get that. And we'll go through those questions at any of this. We'll go through all those questions entered at the end. So next slide. So let's go ahead and get started with the session. Tasha, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Benny. So today we're going to talk about KeyBank's configuration of PPM and how we've kind of evolved over the last couple of years to support our funding lifecycle for programs and projects. It's definitely been a journey, and a lot of the development work that the team has done to support what the organization needs. It's been really interesting, and I think we've learned a lot about the Microfocus application, and we had a lot of great support from Microfocus as well. So went through the introduction already. Just to give you a level set what version we're on with Microfocus, we're currently on 9.55. We do have an upgrade plan for later this year, but this was we implemented our current version last year. We currently support a 3,000 plus user community, and we currently support a project portfolio of over 140 million. So for today, I want to go through kind of not where we started, but probably the prior state before we implemented all of the changes I'm reviewing today with our funding cycle. We'll go through the challenges with that previous configuration, And then we'll go through the changes that were implemented, and then we'll walk through the current state. We'll also go through some of the benefits that we achieved from revamping our process and the way we configured our funding in PPM. And then we'll go through a quick demo in our PPM environment, and then we'll do it in one of our lower environments. And then if you have any questions at the end, we can address those at that time. One thing I will also add as part of level set is the focus today is really on how we configured and the way we set up request types. It's less about all of the processes and controls and standards that we put in place as an organization to support those. But that certainly was also a big part of the revamp. So these configurations, sometimes they were the lead on addressing changes in the organization, and sometimes they were a result of changes in the organization that caused us to have to reconfigure to support the new funding cycle. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at implementing some type of these changes at your organization. Okay, so our prior program and project funding and value attainment lifecycle at Key, in PPM, we had the business case proposal, and that was created and went through funding approvals from an ideation and proposal state, and then if it was approved by the funding committees, it would spawn a project in PPM. And with that project in the life cycle, if it needed additional funding at a later time in the life cycle, but prior to end, we have had a request type called business case summary, where the project could then request additional funds. It would go through those same governing bodies and request approval for additional funding, and the financial summary and the approved budget would be updated, and then the project would continue on. So it was a very one-to-one. And then from a program standpoint, we created using the out-of-the-box program request type in PPM, the programs, and then associated manually, quote unquote, the projects to the program. So you would add each project that was part of the program individually. And then from a funding standpoint for programs, there really wasn't any mechanism in place. It really was based from the bottom up, from the project level, and then the program was just basically a loose association from a financial standpoint of the project funding. And then additionally, outside of that, we had value attainment that was being tracked. It was actually being tracked in SharePoint. So these benefits that these projects were promising when they requested initial funding or additional funding, the realization of that promised value was being tracked outside of the PPM tool. And there really wasn't a good mechanism to kind of tie those without having manual or duplicate data entry. Okay. So the challenges with this previous configuration, it was very inefficient. It was duplicative data entry. There was manual linking of entities, and there was a lack of some type of snapshot view of proposed ideas values. So people were having to enter data on the business case proposal and cost centers, project sponsors, in order to get the idea funded. And then if they were associated with a program, that program entity required a duplicate data entry. And in instances where additional funding was requested, there was an additional point of updated data entry. And then with the snapshot view, when these requests went to funding governing bodies, there was a request from executive management to take all of this data that PPM was able to contain in order to fund a request and put it in a nice, pretty snapshot view for upper management to look. It's kind of a one-page summary to make it easier to review and discuss multiple requests for funding in a short amount of time. Additionally, this previous configuration, because of the manual duplicate data entry, resulted in diminished data quality. Because there was manual linking of entities, there was often a disconnect after a certain point in time of the data between the entities. Additionally, a manual duplicate entry is always open to human error. And then there is a disconnect overall between recorded funding approvals at the project level and then program tracking. So if you're funding the project and then manually having to add that funded approved funding at the program level to kind of keep the two in sync, that manual disconnect was a problem. And then reduced accountability. So there was no tie between actual project value attainment, other than that separate system, but not in PPM, to the benefits that were promised in the initial request for funding. So high level, what we did, what we implemented in PPM to address these issues were we created a new request type called business case proposal to support funding requests of either a program or a project. And it was modeled after the out-of-the-box proposal, but we created a separate request type for that. And then from that, as part of that business case proposal, we also created a one-page summary to provide a simple view for senior management and finance to review these funding requests for committee approvals. And it's available for both the business case proposal for the initial request of funding, as well as additional requests for funding. So for our business case summaries, which are supplemental requests after the project has entered planning. Once the business case proposal is submitted and fully approved, the new funded program or project record, whichever is selected as part of the business case proposal, is automatically spawned. So all the pertinent data elements from the business case proposal, including the financial summary forecast and benefits, and the expected business outcomes, which is a table that we created on the proposal, are auto-populated on the new record so that they match what was on the business case proposal, and it's baselined. So all of that is done basically at the click of a button once the approvals go through. For program records, the program manager can spawn projects from the funded program at the click of a button as well. So you have the top-down from the business case proposal, once approved, spawning a program, or if it's not related to a program, it can always do a project. But if it spawns a program, then you have all of that data that's pertinent brought down and populated. And then the program manager can then spawn individual projects with that same pertinent data. Not all of the data for the program is going to be applicable to the project, so we have decided which fields and which data points get carried over. But those projects then are auto-populated with the data. So a few project-specific data fields must be entered or validated to complete the creation. And I will say we've left out, for obvious reasons, we did not auto-populate the financial summary data because it is, you're not going to fund each project at the same level that you do the program. But there's no reason from a functionality standpoint we couldn't have achieved it. It just didn't make sense for us. And then we still offer or still allow program functionality for oversight or content-driven records, so that manual connection. Sometimes that happens if a program ends and you've got orphan projects that then morph into a different program. So we wanted that flexibility to retain both approaches. As stated before, we created a request type called business case summary, and that also supports funding requests after programs or projects are already in progress to support additional funding requests. And that request type is used for either project funding or for program funding. And then we also created value attainment request types, one specific for agile projects and one specific for waterfall or multi-release type projects, since the way those projects deliver value is different. And those request types connect the expected business outcomes table that we created on the business case proposal and link it to the measurable event outcomes on projects. Okay. We'll go through it and show that in PPM as well. So the program to project flow then is the business case proposal, submit for decision, that's our proposal state. Then it goes through a little bit more robust request. So if it passes that initial idea state, then the development of details and benefits for the effort are entered into the business case proposal request type. And then it's submitted for final funding, review, and approval. And then if it, Gotta love the scroll wheel on a mouse. Okay, so then it's submitted for funding review and approval, and if approved, if it was submitted for a standalone project, then that is spawned, or if it was submitted for a program, then that program is spawned. And then the program manager can then create multiple projects to allocate that program funding however they see fit. So the business case proposal creates the program. The business case summary provides ongoing funding opportunities for the program. And this is just a quick snapshot or a snippet from our PPM environment. So you can see the selections available are program funding or project funding. And then the funding scope for the initial business case proposal is we can fully fund the project, or fund only the planning phase of a project, or the delivery phase of a project, or the overall program. And then the individual projects of that program then pull funding from the program. And then if additional funds are needed, the projects don't need to go to the finance governing boards to request additional funds. The program allocates that money to them on their request as applicable. And then the program manager, if they run out of funds, they just go through the business case summary to request funding for the overall program. But much more efficient for our needs. So then looking at the one pager, and I realize this may be an eye chart for some of you if you're looking at the screen, but we will be sending a deck out of this after. Just this one page view shows what our finance review boards found to be valuable. But you can see, so we've got our stakeholders up here, our specific data points that are applicable to, whether or not it's a program or a project, high-level business case objectives. You have your labor costs and the funding, what money they're asking for today. And then this data is pulled from the grid boxes are pulled from the financial summary in PPM. PPM. I mean, all of this data is pulled from PPM, but these blue or dollar boxes are pulled from the financial summary. So you've got your benefits and whether or not it's cost reduction or revenue and overtime. And then we have the costs, so the labor costs, business costs, ongoing or one time. And then we have the promised business outcome for the idea. So if it's going to cost the organization $5 million to complete or $6 million to complete over time, what benefit are we gaining from this? And this is where that increased accountability comes into play. So if you're saying that we're going to get a $4 million benefit off of this, maybe it's a have to have, or it's something for increasing customer retention. There has to be a lot of thought into how these KPIs are developed, and then what's being promised, because at the end or throughout the project lifecycle, depending on the project approach, we hold the teams accountable for reaching this. If we need to revise value attainment requests, we do have mechanisms in place to do that in PPM, but it's all about having the ability to tie the request to the results. Okay. So our current state value attainment process, as I stated, we have the total benefits forecast on the financial summary must remain in balance with the expected business outcomes measured for value attainment. So this is a little snippet of that. We have our expected business outcomes. It's a table on the project details page pulled from the business case proposal. You have your KPI measurement, direct benefits, baseline target, target achievement date, and there can be multiple. And so in this instance, this is a soft benefit, not a hard dollar benefit. So we understand that there's some regulatory projects or some must-do projects that may not increase revenue or may not result in a save, but they should still, if they're being funded, be able to confirm that the objectives were achieved. So again, a combination of hard and soft benefits is expected and accommodated. Value attainment for agile projects is measured and reported on monthly. And then value attainment for waterfall, multi-release waterfall projects are measured as indicated per the requirements of the project and reported on quarterly. So you may have a waterfall multi-release project that doesn't gain value until a year after all the project has been implemented. So the project may be quote unquote closed in PPM, but we still have the value attainment measurable event open. So in the example I'm showing here, if we're increasing our customer satisfaction score year-to-date average from 4.1 to 4.3. And we'll measure that in December 22, even though whatever we're delivering is supposed to be complete by December 2021. And these are all like fake examples. So the key benefits of our new funding process for programs and projects is we've seen minimized duplication of data entry for common fields. So it was a list for the people that are really responsible for entering in the flurry of business case proposals and then creating projects and then populating projects from programs. We ask for a lot of data for our stakeholders. So it really was a lot of duplicate data entry that we were able to get rid of because of the spawning process. And we reduced data quality issues resulting from that. manual data entry, as well as the manual linkage. So they really are kind of like symbiotic with one another. So the PPM linked record disconnection is no longer an issue with that, the value attainment piece, and the data spawned is auto-populated. For our purposes, it supports a flexible funding model for programs, especially for agile capability, supported by identified future KPIs. It creates a centralized record and approval workflow for program funding and funding change. And the child project creation and funding at the discretion of the program manager, instead of having to go through a funding approval board for something that had already been approved for a huge dollar level. It's making the best use of our senior management time and this funding review board's time. And then providing the ability to track value attainment realized from funding projects and compare those results to initially promised performance outcomes has resulted in increased accountability and a lot more visibility into how much opportunity is a good way to put it, how much opportunity we have at making better KPIs and promised value. So there really is a lot more thought now, knowing that there's going to be accountability at the end. Okay. So we'll go into the demo portion here. Okay. And I have these staged in our lower environment. You see Epic, that's what we call our version of PPM here at Key, EPPIC. So this is a view into the business case proposal request type that we have created. So we've got our data points. This is the expected business outcomes that I was referring to, and the total forecasted benefits that is pulling from the financial summary. So this dollar amount must reconcile with the total direct benefit listed in the expected business outcomes to the financial summary. And then we have the funding scope set at program, and then our risk ratings that we use to calculate whether or not it should go to the next stage. And we've got our finance funding. So if I were to click approve, so this is the last step in our approval workflow, it would spawn a program. And I've already, just because I don't want to rely on, it's asking for a confirmation here. It takes a second for everything to render. But when we go into the program here, this is what it spawns. And you can see the proposal that was created. It's showing under the closed. And then you've got the projects that I'll show that we're spawning as well. But one of the things that I had noted that the program spawning from the business case proposal does as well, we go to the financial summary. You can see that we do have a snapshot. So whatever was originally created or promised on the business case proposal as part of the request, the initial funding request, gets baselined on either the project or the program that was spawned. So we always have that initial funding history. Okay. And so I did want to show you, so I took a snippet of the one pager, but we have that hyperlinked and generated here. So if data is updated on the business case proposal. You click a save and it refreshes the data. But right now, what I'm showing here has been completed and approved. So this is the business case proposal now that we were looking at before. And you can see that the program has now spawned. Okay. And then if I include that closed, you see that proposal that we just clicked the approve button on and it spawned. So it takes a little bit of seconds for it to complete, but all of the data that was on that proposal is now on the program. So we've got all of the risk ratings, all of the business case detail, all of the benefits, the financial summaries populated, all of that data. So this is all stuff, a lot of which had to be manually done on the program level because it was created separately and then associated with the project. So if I'm going to confirm this, let me go back to my examples. So there's a couple of confirmation steps I have to go through, but we'll go back to the actual program. That I created yesterday, since I've already gone through those approval steps. And now let's say I want to create a project. So as a program manager, I want to create a project, and it's going to tell me direct benefit dollars do not equal total forecasted benefit dollars. So this is that must be in alignment. So if the forecast dollars that are on the financial summary for the program don't equal what's listed here, then it's going to create a disconnect. So you see the forecast benefits are now different from what's on the program. So it won't let me create the project until I reconcile that. So if I did reconcile that and then spawned create project, it asked me to validate a few pieces of information and then spawn the actual project. So I spawned two for our demo today. So we've got an Agile project as well as a waterfall multi-release project. And you can see, again, the details all pulled and populated based off of that click of a button after a couple of confirmation steps, because we want to make sure that the delivery approach is accurate, that you know, this project may or may not be capital. There's a couple of different data points that need to be considered before approval is completed. But all of the other information is pulled down and can be updated if it's not applicable. But we felt as a balance between what do we think is going to be most useful and reduce duplicate data entry, and then what do we know is going to be the same at the project level, spawned from a program, and then what do we know is not going to be applicable. So as stated before, we know in our environment the project forecasts are not going to be the same as the program forecast. So we did not bring over the financial summary cost for that from the program spawning. Okay. Then with that, we also have our value attainment for waterfall multi-release projects. So I can create a value attainment request that's associated with this project. And I did this already for our example. We pull some associated request information from the project details page. And then we have our measurable event items that then follow that Lifecycle we looked at previously. So where the business case defines estimated benefit, its project is created, then the value attainment is created, and then once the project has reached the measurable event date, when should we start measuring? Then we have a supporting process in place to pull the information and determine, which projects have reached their initial measure date. We send notifications to the event owner to say it's time for you to start measuring. And once they measure it, they provide a score. So did it meet our promised value, or is it not time to measure it yet? We thought it was supposed to be measured by December, but it's actually not going to be measured until January. They need to put comments if that's the case. We note when it was measured and if there is a next measure date. So let's say this one needed to be measured again, then maybe it didn't meet value and it was unsatisfactory, and they say, well, we want to measure it again in March and see if we reach it at that point. They choose a different date. So, and then we've got the approvers, and we keep a record of the baseline and changes to approvers as well. So that has its own workflow. Then if we were to go to a continuous delivery, an agile type project, we call it continuous delivery here at Key. An agile type project where they're delivering value constantly through frequent sprints. It doesn't necessarily make sense to have this this date so far off in the future, since one of the benefits of agile delivery is increased or a reduction in time for realization of value. So with our agile projects, we have the expected business outcomes here listed below, and I've populated this for the project level. So this rolls up to the program level, but we do have in this one we have a soft benefit as well as a hard dollar benefit. And I would edit this here and note this is still applicable, and our PVA result for this month is now 200,000. So this is constantly updated on a monthly basis. We're in a green status, and then we've released an additional 5 user stories, so we're now at 8 user stories, and we're now back in green. And then I'm going to click save. And then generate project value attainment. So this is a different approach than we did for value attainment for waterfall multi-release. And then once that is generated, and again, we're in dev, so that's a little bit slower than our production environment. Give me a second. Go. And go to our dashboard here. And you can see this is my second month. I should have updated the date, but I didn't. And we can see that this is the resulting project value attainment. If I agree with this, then we push it through for its complete approvals. So the expectation is for these agile projects that they will continue to report their value attainment achievement on a regular cadence until they've reached it or they're complete. So if they don't reach it, then and the effort is ended, then it would still be complete. Okay. So that is the overview of the configurations that we discussed. So we'll go back here and the current slide. If you have any questions at this time, go ahead and type those questions in the question pane.
So Tasha, this is Benny. That was a great presentation and a fantastic overview of your funding process, especially the PPM demo portion. So there are a few questions in the QA section. So I'm going to go ahead and give the guys, the attendees, just a few more minutes to add any if they'd like. Then I'll go ahead and read out some of those questions one by one. And if you don't mind, Tasha, you can just answer them to the best of your ability. Some of them might be a little bit technical, but I think that most of them, are pretty relevant for you.
Okay. And
so actually, I'll get started for it.
If it's something that I can't personally answer and I need to rely on someone from my team, I will get those answers to people after the call. So, and I think we have a plan to make sure that everything gets addressed.
Okay, awesome. So let me just get started with, I think this is a nice, easy one you could potentially demo, maybe. Did you configure any dashboards or special portlets to take advantage of all the linked entities in your current state?
Yes. So let me go through here. So we go to our dashboards for our business case portlets. We have business case proposal details and business case summary details. The business case summary actually includes both the proposal and summary request types and for programs and projects. But as you guys know, the functionality, you could filter based off of that funding designation. So whether or not it's, oh, actually that's a different, but yeah, you can filter off of that, or you could build it for, whatever type of filtering you want. But we had the need to show only proposals in one type, but then the request came to be able to show all proposals and summaries, so all funding requests, regardless of whether or not they were for projects or programs, into one portlet view. And this one, I will say, the person on my team that does this is a beast of a query, and he is brilliant for doing this, to get all of those request types. And two, you also have to think, for every different version, iteration, sometimes we're able to keep the same version request type and make changes, but then when there's really dramatic changes, to be able to create a new version is sometimes cleaner or sometimes required. And then making sure that those queries include all of the historical versions as well. So that's kind of what he's done for that. And again, we're in our lower environment, so this is going to show a little bit different type data. So, and then for our Epic value attainment details, so we do have, this is for the value attainment for waterfall multi-release, and so we have the views for that as well. And then for the CD portlet, we do have one, but I don't think I have that added in my dev environment. So, but yes, it's the portlet capabilities are sufficient for what our stakeholders need to obtain the information from this overall funding view. Okay, good question.
Great, thanks for that answer. So the next question is around the that one-page summary, the senior management. So specifically, and I think you've shown it during the demo portion, the question is, was that a specific request type in PPM, or do you use that using PPM reporting or some third-party reporting tool?
So this was developed using JavaScript. So this was the initial version. We leveraged a external vendor to develop a couple years back, but since that initial creation, we've been managing it, especially with all of the changes that were required for program. We had to build this into the program cycle, so that had to be revamped. But yes, it is developed using JavaScript.
And since it's JavaScript, is it real time? So as soon as you click on it, it's generating information?
Yes, correct. So the business case proposal is updated on a save, and then for the business case summary, because of the way we pull the data from the project details page, and then you go to the summary request type and then save it, it requires a couple of saves, but it's real time.
Okay, interesting. And a follow-up question from the same user. In your environment, who is allowed to create proposals? Do you limit to a very small subset of users in order to avoid duplicates? Is it the project manager or application/program owner?
So for the business case proposals, the initial ideas are created throughout the line of business and technology, and there's different approaches. Sometimes they have a portfolio manager, and at that point, the portfolio manager may enter a lot of them on behalf of the line of business users. But from a configuration standpoint, we do have it restricted to people that have a specific user group to allow them to create business case requests. So we do have it, like, from a configuration standpoint, restricted. From a practice standpoint throughout the organization, it really could be, it varies by the line of business. You know, if we get people that are in technology requesting technology projects, they do it themselves in our system. But then you get people that are outside of technology in the line of business, they probably have their technology counterpart enter it on their behalf because they're not used to using Epic.
Okay.
Our PPM tool, sorry. It's a habit.
Yeah, it's a little confusing, Epic, right, nowadays, this term.
I know.
Okay. So hopefully that answers your question, Mike. Next question. Did you use PPM Web Services or the PPM REST API to populate the program from the proposal?
Yes. So we used Web Services. And it was we used the example of the program creation that was kind of already in place in Epic or in PPM. And then we used that to leverage, or my lead tech guy did all of the programming to create or spawn the program from the business case proposal. It's a Java file using Web Services.
Okay. So lots of programming via Java Web Services. Okay.
Yeah.
So this one's kind of a little bit more of a process question. So could any of the changes that you've made to the financial process for KeyBank be changes that apply to all customers, or are they really specific only for KeyBank's usage? So for example, the automatic creation of a financial baseline each time proposal spawns a project or program.
Say that last portion again. Sorry.
So I'll just repeat the whole question again. So could any of the changes you've made to the financial process for KeyBank be changes that could apply to all customers, or do you think they're really specific only for KeyBank's usage? For example, the automatic creation of a financial baseline each time a proposal spawns a project or program.
I think so. Banking, any highly regulatory environment, so healthcare, financial, I think that baselining is required for us. We have to be able to show and record changes for a 4-month period. Like, we have to keep data and retain approvals. It's very, very stringent on what has to be recorded and retained. So I think if you are in that type of environment, you definitely are probably already doing something like that. Is there benefit? Yes, especially if you are comparing project performance or program performance. That's where I think baselining helps as well. If you're doing that look back on performance. But from a requirement standpoint, I mean, it really just depends on the needs of your organization. I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. I think it's a great response to a great question. So, and like you said, anytime you need a lot of governance or just a lot of regulations in your particular types of industry, it's probably a good idea to do this anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question. If there is a large change or change request, perhaps like an acquisition, are you expected to go back and adjust the original business outcomes on the project proposal, or do you somehow handle it on the value attainment portion?
So if there is a large change request, that the expectation is that you are, or that the teams are keeping their expected benefits up to date. I will say that the value attainment process is the newest portion of the funding changes that we've done on the life cycle. So I would say a next step in our maturity is to have a formula, like a formal process for change requests of value attainment. We don't currently have that in place today, other than you should update it, and we are baselining it. But I think a next maturity step would be to formalize it and make sure that specific stakeholders impacted by the change in business outcomes are informed and aware. So yeah, that's definitely a growth on the horizon. So.
Okay, so I think that's actually a good segue to the next question. How long did it take to implement this process? Was it done in phases? It sounds like it's still ongoing, right?
Yeah, it's definitely still evolving. And so we started with the one pager a couple of years ago, and then the program funding about the year later. And then, I mean, we make changes to these request types all the time based off of requests from stakeholders for different pieces of information, but the main changes in the workflow model, I'd say, have occurred over a 2-year period.
Okay. Work in progress. Okay.
Yeah.
So one last question, and I think this is that you already answered, but I think I just want to reconfirm it. So there seems to be some keen interest on the one pager. The question is, what is used to create the one pager? And I think you mentioned it was just some custom JavaScript, correct?
Correct. And I mean, it's HTML too, obviously.
Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Sandra. So that was actually the last of the questions. I'll just give maybe a couple seconds to a minute if anyone wants to ask any more questions. And these questions and answers will actually be typed up and available on Vivit as well in a few days. So go ahead and ask any last minute questions. So I think that's actually it, Tasha. So a lot of good food for thought here. Just have a few quick slides to go through, and that'll get us to the end of our time together, which would be really close to the end of the hour as well. Okay, so we have a slide here for an upcoming event on February 12th for the Agile Reflect Festival. You can go ahead and register for the event on the Vivit website under our community calendar. Next slide. We also have our on-demand recordings for Vivit's recent virtual community days. They're posted on the website, so go ahead, please, and check that out on our website. Okay, So last slide. Thank you for attending today's Microfocus Project and Portfolio Management SIG webinar. Thank you, Tasha, for presenting and sharing your knowledge. And thank you, everybody, thank you, everybody on the call for participating. And I hope you found this information informative. There is a short survey after the webinar ends. We'd love to get your feedback, so please go ahead and make sure you fill that out. And just a quick reminder again, the on-demand recordings and the slide deck will be posted to the Vivit website, including answers to the questions today. In the next few days, you'll get an email with those links. So with that being said, thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.